Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. I have put everybody on mute, and for the duration of the presentation, I'll keep everyone on mute, and then I'll open up the conference bridge at the end and take any questions. Feel free, if you'd like, to put in a question in the chat in case you think of something and don't want to forget it. Also, I can use that to follow up later in case we don't get to your question or if we want to, we need to talk in more detail about it. So thank you for attending today. We have a new topic called Advanced Reports tab in OpenAir. My name is Stephanie Picardi, and I'm a Senior Business Consultant with Top Step Consulting, and I'll be hosting us today. So I have a presentation that we'll go through, and then at the end, like I said, we can take any questions as needed. So today's topic is going to focus on the Advanced tab in the Reports module. And so the questions that we aim to answer are, why are they advanced, which ones are right for me, and when to use advanced versus other report types. In the presentation, I have several sample reports to show you and walk through. And then if we have any questions, I can go into the product and dig a little bit deeper, get into more details on specific configurations or options within those reports. But overall, I just want to introduce you to these reports and also show you how some of the reports are essential, typically recommended for use by most clients, and other reports based on functionality that you may want to use. And also rolling out and introducing just reports in general, which reports may be good for basic users or individual functionality. So the Advanced tab is shown under, it's next to the Summary and Detail. So it's a separate tab, and these are meant to be more canned reporting. So rather than configuring the reports, there's more limited options in the report configuration. And in many cases, they are, there's specific functionality. You can execute functionality from them, or the specific formatting that's unique to these reports. So they are a bit different than your standard Summary and Detail reports, which can certainly be advantageous and sometimes a little bit limiting. The reports are grouped by module, as you see here in the screenshot, and this is, throughout the system where you see other reports, you have these modules or where you have on your modules list. So the naming conventions and everything should be fairly similar, at least looking at the module names. Now, if you're not using certain modules or a user does not have access to the module, then they won't see that section of reports. And this is consistent with the Summary and Detail tabs as well. The modules are defined in the user profile under the menu item Access Control, and you can specify which modules users have access to. Also, some of these reports may not be visible if you're not using the functionality. For example, the Leave Accrual Summary report, if you don't have Leave Accruals enabled, then this report won't appear here. And as soon as you do enable it in your system, the report then appears there. So why are these reports advanced? What makes them advanced, and why are they segregated out? Advanced reports contain some unique features that I was mentioning. We'll go through sample reports in each of these categories. So simplified report configuration, there's less options on the report configuration. Again, this can make it a bit easier to run a report initially and understand the information that's provided. However, that can be a bit limiting in terms of not being able to filter exactly the way that you want or summarize the way that you want, group totals, things like that. So it's great for new users or if you're new to OpenAir to run these reports and familiarize yourself with the filtering and the details of reports in a more simplified view, and then also the layout of reports and kind of how these reports run on data. Tailored formatting, so some of them have specific formats that either it allows you to click through and you can drill down into details, or the format may be unique to that report. For example, there's a client statement one that we'll take a look at in a minute that looks like the client statement from the invoices module. Doesn't look like a typical tabular report that you normally see with the summary and detail. So there's some different formatting that you can get there. They're still available to be downloaded to Excel or copy and paste nicely to Excel as well. Execution of functionality, so you can, in some of these reports, actually create transactions in the system or create records in the system. Now, of course, this is something that can be very powerful, but also very useful. So you may want to limit who has access to perform these types of functions, or when you're rolling out these reports, keep in mind what functionality is available with them. And it can also be that you don't want to have everyone in the system having access. You don't want basic end users to be running these reports and creating transactions. So we'll talk about roles a little bit when we get to that portion. As far as unique reporting information, there's some reports that you really can only get that information from this advanced report. You can only get it in that view and with that criteria. So like the timesheet status report, which I'm sure many of you are running, that's one good example of unique reporting where you can report on missing timesheets and also the approval status without having to look at a whole lot of other detail. So it's a really clean view of the status of the timesheet. And administration auditing reporting, so for those of you that are administrators, there's a couple of reports there depending on functionality that you're using. For example, if you're using hierarchies, if you're updating custom field drop-downs, things like that you can use for auditing purposes and to help you manage data in the system. And database reference information as well, so being able to, there's really a report here that I'll reference, the summary report values. So if you don't want to give users access to the menu item to view those values under administration, but they can use the report to view those values. So starting with our first topic here, the simplified report configuration. This here is an example of the historical utilization report. And you can see from the configuration options here that it's similar to the summary reports. We have our time period section up at the top. You can see the subtotals down here, hierarchies. But notice the available options and selected are limited to just the one. So rather than having that pick list that you normally see in summary reports, and you can pick the metrics that you want to report on, you only have the one metric here, and that's not something you can change. Now, this particular report actually has quite a bit of other configuration options in terms of how you want to define your utilization calculation, so you can play around with that. But the metric to report on, there's only one metric here. So a sample of that report, here I've got it by hierarchy and user with a few detail fields for the user. So there's the ability to put in some detail here. And then here I am running this report monthly for a period of 6 months, similar to our summary reports. But this is only the one metric. So notice I don't have headers here for saying that this is their, their assigned utilization versus their booked utilization or actual utilization, et cetera. I just have the one, and I can't change that. There is some color coding in this one, which is actually the only report in the system that allows for the color coding. So this report can be great if you don't have a complex utilization calculation, and maybe you're new to reporting on resource management. So you don't have a lot of reports that you're used to seeing or used to running, and this report can be a great starter, very easy to use and easy to configure. But as you mature in resource management, you may find that you want to report on more metrics and move to using a summary report for that. So another one is the Overbudget and Late Tasks report. So this report would show you just any of those tasks that meet your project filter criteria. So within those projects, any tasks that are over budget or late. And notice I have no configuration options here except to exclude transactions associated with inactive entries. So I can filter by project, which you probably want to do, or using your report filter set to limit the projects that are shown here. However, I can't limit by project owner, by client. I can't choose to show more or less detail in this report. So this report is as is. Now there is an option to click through and look at a graphical view of this by clicking on this graph here, but I have no configuration. I can't say I want to show any custom fields in here, or that I want to maybe not show billed and just show planned versus worked. So for a client that maybe isn't doing invoicing, this may not be super helpful for you, or it may just be you're always going to have zeros in this billed column and you may not want to see that. But again, great for if you're rolling out reports, or if you haven't had many reports before, or maybe maturing your project management methodology and kind of starting from the basics. So to get managers used to running reports out of the system, used to seeing reports and going to OpenAir for information. Another one here is the project budgets, and the one with money instead of hours in the parentheses here is reporting on the dollar values of project budgets. Again, I have no options about what I can show in this report or the detail, the level of detail that I want to show. I can adjust the currency, and I can filter for projects. So I have a little bit more options here for filtering, but no detail fields that I can add. So this report, again, is as is, canned out of the box. You can get a graphical view of the budget versus the budget available, but this is as is. So I can't show any additional detail here. Same thing as before, very good for simple basic reporting if reporting is new to your organization. And also, the budgets here, if you're maintaining and updating the budgets, if budgets are going to be out of date, then the information that you're getting here is not going to be of value. So for the tailored formatting, this is where the format of the report is unique, or you can drill down into the details. So this report, at first sight, looks like many of the other summary or detail reports. However, it's one row per project. That's all I can get. I can't get further detail in this particular report. And if I click through here, I can notice where it's in blue. And on any of these reports where you're seeing blue, you can do something. You can click through to detail. It will take you to another module or section in the system, maybe sorting, things like that. So I see that it's in blue. Click on the name, and what I'm getting is the project overview. Now the fields that I can show in the tabular report are the basis for the project overview report. The project overview report, this is exactly what you see if you go into the project dashboard and under the report section run the project overview from within the report. So this is a nice report to have on your dashboard for all of your projects, and then just be able to click through into the details. The financial analysis report, very similar to the one I was just showing you with the click-through options. And again, the available columns and metrics that you can report on are related to the financial analysis report. So same report as from within the project when you're running the financial analysis report. Another good one, if you like the financial analysis report, some clients like that this is a nice synopsis. It does require that you're using, the revenue and billing, to make all of the values here, and also that you have cost in the system to make all of the values meaningful in the report. You can get some funny numbers if you're not using, if you don't have costs in here. Some of the numbers may not make sense. Things like profit, et cetera, won't. be of value. And again, this is still driven by a resource's access. So if the resource doesn't have access to cost rates, they're not going to be able to see the cost information. Or if they don't have access to billing, they won't see the billing information. So I mentioned this report before for the tailored formatting, the client statements. Talking about simplified configuration here, there is literally one option. You select the client that you want to show the invoice balances. Now this report is showing you all the invoices for the clients, the amount of the invoice, and the balance. So if you're using payments on this, you'll be able to see where there's an outstanding balance. So this can be run from within the invoices module. Within a particular invoice, you can look at a client statement. This is one way of doing it in bulk and not having to go through the go through the invoices module. But again, I can't configure what is shown here in the statement. So if you want to say, well, we don't need the billing information, I can't hide that or customize it. Also, the columns that are shown here are fixed. It can be a great report for your project or program managers working with clients. They have access to it in the reports, and they can easily pull this up if a client's asking for it or they need to provide this information. Use it as reference for account managers to understand, what's outstanding, and for finance also if you're needing to chase down any payments or a client's asking you for all outstanding invoices, etc. So executing functionality, this is where we can actually create transactions and records from within the report. And a primary example on this one, this is a very widely used report, the pending billings report. So for those of you that are creating billing transactions and using the invoices module, this is typically a go-to report. And just wanted to cover the functionality that is included in this report. So again, I see here I've got my project name is in blue, which leads me to believe I can do something here. So if I click on the project name, it's going to actually take me out of that report and into the projects module. So notice I have all my menu items here. I'm in my OA Consulting for America's project, and it takes you directly to the billing menu item. Now here I see as if I was within the project and I clicked on Run Billing to execute the billing transactions. I have the same I have the same options here for selecting what I want to bill for, what transactions and charges I want to create. I can click through to see more detail if I want to click through into what would be created. And I can also create my project billing transactions and charges right from here. Now I can choose to go back to the report. I don't have to do anything here. If I just wanted to view the detail, this is one option. In a recent release, I believe it was the November release, they included a pending billing detail report, which would allow you to run that report without actually executing any functionality. So it would run the report, but that is a detail report you'd have to configure. You can get all of the same detail that we're showing here, but you won't be able to execute the billing rules from that report. So if I don't want to do anything here, if I don't want to create my billing transactions, I can simply return to my next billing report. I can go through the projects, so go to the next project in the report if I want to. So you can see how this would be very powerful for anyone who has access to run billing. It's a way of centrally running billing. Actually, the way of centrally running billing is using this option down at the bottom, which from the pending billings report itself, if I don't want to drill down and individually create the transactions by project, I can create them here. When I click there, it's just going to say, are you sure you want to create these transactions? And then it will create transactions for all of the projects that are displayed in the report. So this can be good for project managers that are processing, invoicing at the end of the month, or you guys have a specific time frame for that. But again, can be very powerful if you do have someone that has access to this and they're creating transactions for everyone and for all projects. So another report on executing functionality is the historical utilization report. So we already took a look at this one when we were talking about the configuration options. But there is the option to adjust users' loaded cost. What this is used for, I've always called this dilution. Some of you may be familiar with that term. But what this is typically used for is where you have salaried employees and you want to adjust their cost rate up or down based on the hours of work. So let's take the case of you have someone that works a 40-hour week and their salary, they're getting a regular salary no matter how many hours they work. If they're working let's say they enter in their timesheets 45 hours, the cost of that resource actually goes down because you're still only paying them for the 40 hours. So what this option to adjust the user's loaded cost, it actually enters in a cost rate into the user profile. So it creates a record there. Now, this can be used to dilute up and down. So if you had that 40-hour employee that only charges 30 hours that week or only enters 30 hours that week, their cost rate would go up because you're still paying them for a 40-hour work week. So it's important in this report, excuse me, it's important in this report to make sure that the metric that you're running on includes the time types or projects and tasks. So consider how PTO should be included in this, or unpaid leave and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're using the right criteria to create these adjustments. So that's something that's very powerful. Clients, typically it sounds like a good idea, and then when they realize what's involved in making sure that you're running it right, you want to make sure it's very controlled, and sometimes end up just saying, okay, it's better for us to manage this manually, so we make sure that we're entering in the right amounts. Another one here is the fixed fee projections report. So this is unique in that it's only running on fixed fee billing rules. But what it does is it allows you to calculate projected end dates, and you can run this by period. And if you run this by period, you can choose to move any late milestones to the current period. So you can see where it should have been billed based on the end date, but where if it hasn't been billed and you want to move it to the current period, you can see that. So it's good for your milestone forecasting and also for understanding where you need to update milestones on projects. So if you run your billing for the month and then run this report and see where your late milestones are, then you can target those to be updated. So this report can run projections from the billing rules or from the revenue recognition rules. And you have a few options here on your layout, the level of detail that you show, and also filtering by client and project. On the time period option, there's a couple options here to either break down the remaining amount by period, or to, well, not or, but you can actually do all three, or not moving the late rules to the first period, which would mean you leave it where it should have been billed according to the end date of the rule, and also including the used amounts in the total. So including the used amounts would show you what you've billed so far. So I can see on this line item here, and I apologize, it's a bit small, but on this line item I can see that the total is $3,000 US. The used amount is $2,000. I have a remaining of $1,000, so I have a percentage used here. My apologies. So I can see if any portion of it has been already billed, and also do some projections on that. So now we move into the next topic of unique report information. So I mentioned previously the timesheet status report. This is a commonly used report. We typically recommend it for clients. It's great for looking in a very simplified format, very quick report. Managers may run this on their team. You may run it on a global level to look at all timesheets. But you can see where timesheets are in the approval process, see if they're missing would be for an X. So there's a unique legend here. This isn't used in other reports. And you can actually see where timesheets are missing. A for approved, S for submitted, O for open. And where I have multiple timesheets here, if you have those overlapping periods and you need someone to submit a timesheet, midweek, typically we find this at the end of the month when the end of the month falls within the middle of a week. You want them to submit through the end of the month and then submit another timesheet. So the system's tracking them as separate timesheets. So in this is a little odd because in some of these cases I have 3 and 4 timesheets. You wouldn't typically see that, but you'd be able to see where a timesheet is missing. So if they've submitted their first timesheet for the week, but they still need to create the second timesheet. Now the next report is the accounts receivable report. And this report can be a wonderful report, especially if you're tracking, well, really only if you're tracking payments in the system, but if you are maybe don't have access to the accounting system, or you need to give this type of information to people who don't have access to the accounting system, this report is great for that. What I have here, I'm subtotaling this one by invoice so I can see by client all of the invoices, and I can see where they're current. So I have an invoice that was maybe just submitted or dated in the current period. And then I have these aging buckets where I can see where the dollar values are falling. So in this particular case, I have, for my Intex client here, they have one invoice that's current, but they have an invoice that's 108 days outstanding. I see I have some invoices here from my Horn Honk client that's over 121 days late. And as soon as you enter in the payments, the amounts will update either 0 if they don't, well, it'll disappear from the report, but if you do a partial payment, it will update according to the payment amount and what's outstanding. If you update the invoice amount, the invoice date, that will then move these values within your aging buckets. So if you maybe submitted an invoice and then for some reason they came back and said, oh, can you resubmit this, make this change, and you want to go through reworking it, when you provide the updated date, it will move it into either a current column or move it up a bit. So over here, the aging buckets can be configured. So I've set mine to 1 to 30 days for my first column here, 31 to 60, and then 61. I have a little bit of filtering I can do by client or by department. So if you've got your departments broken out, maybe you have your services and then you have your funded dev, and you want to see where invoices are between those two, or different regions. If you had your Europe and Americas and wanted to run the report by different regions, you could use departments that way. You could do no subtotaling to just get a straight list view of this, or subtotal even by project. So a project manager would be able to see where their client is on paying these invoices. Same thing for account managers. Forgot I had that animation in there for you. And also talking about the subtotals down here at the bottom and how you can do different subtotaling. Something else that you could use is ignoring the terms. So if you wanted to just ignore the payment terms and use the date of the invoice, you could certainly do that. Next report is the leave accrual summary. So, obviously if you're not using leave accruals, this report won't appear for you, but if you have this enabled, this is a great report. HR can use it to manage the balances for resources. Managers can see for their team, and individuals can run this to see their vacation balances. Now, I have this one filtered by just the vacation accrual rule, but you could show this so that it shows all the rules associated for a user. Now, again, we see the blue here, so I know I can do something. So if I go ahead and click on this, I can drill down into the details, and what this is it's actually the leave accrual transaction report. So it's a transaction detail report, and shows you all of the detail here. Now, I'm only showing 10 rows here, that's why my numbers don't match up, but showing all the rows, you'd be able to see where the accrual and drawdown transactions were taken, any notes there, and basically see all the details that make up the accrual and the drawdown to get to the balance. So again, this is not taking you to a separate module, but it's taking you to another report. So it's actually taking you out and into the detail report. So then we get into the administration and auditing reports. So these are helpful for administrators. This role privileges report is a great report. This report will allow you to see by role the access that a role has. So it's great for looking at, if you've got multiple project manager roles with different levels of access. You don't want to have a big long name that explains all of the access, or maybe of different regions using different roles. Allows you to compare, so you can see where you may have duplicated roles, or if you're looking to create a new role, you can see that, if I wanted to create a project administration role that's a little bit different, maybe called project manager, I can look to see if I'd want to start with that role and what permissions it has. So it's easier to see by the privilege group, but it gives you all of those checkboxes that you have in the role privileges are listed here. And so if I say, show me just the general settings, and then I have a diamond for where the role has access. So it allows you to pinpoint and useful for determining updates to make to these roles and identifying maybe where you've given too much access, not enough, where you want to compare similar types of roles. And it can be downloaded to Excel, so you could work with it that way as well. So it's a little easier to look at rather than trying to click into the role and look at all of the options. I think this is a bit cleaner, and I especially like the grouping, being able to filter by the group. You can easily move through it. Just a bit easier on the eyes, a bit easier to process. So then the next one is the custom field value omissions report. So this report is very unique. What it reports on is where you've made changes to the value list in a drop-down custom field. So if I previously had employee in the custom field and then I took it out, I still have transactions, they can be transactions or records that have that value. So when you update that value list, it doesn't automatically update the records and transactions. So this would allow you to see if you have any old values still in there. So I'm not getting a list of which records and which transactions, but I'm just able to see that I have, for the user employee type, I have employee is still specified on some records. So then I can run a detailed report on that field. So what you'd like to see is that it says no values found. It means that you've updated all of your data, and all of your data matches what you have in your current drop-down list. So one of those reports that you may not use all the time, but it's nice to know that it's there. It's a quick audit. You're not going to get a whole laundry list of items here or have to filter through a lot. but it'll just tell you immediately if you have any values that are different from your current drop-down. So good if you're doing any updates, mass updates to your custom fields. I'd refer you to this report. And then the next one, even though it has a similar name, so it's hierarchy omissions, it's a bit different. This actually does show you the records that have a blank value for the hierarchy. So in this report, in this screenshot here, I have for the user hierarchy is what I'm looking at, and I can see that these resources and 9 more have no hierarchy specified in their profile. So I would want to update those. Now you can select which hierarchy you want to report on. So if you have a user hierarchy, a client hierarchy, a project hierarchy, maybe you have multiple project hierarchies or multiple client hierarchies, you can select which one to include, and obviously it's going to look at that record. So the project hierarchy will show you a list of projects where the hierarchy is not specified. So this is a good auditing report. The only thing with hierarchies is that you have to look up the hierarchy internal ID. You can't include the internal ID in this report, but you could download this and be able to support your mass updates. And then the last section here is the database reference information. So the report I have in here is the summary report values. So this is essentially your data dictionary of all of your custom reporting calculations. This could be helpful for, again, a report view. It's a bit easier on the eyes. There's not a whole lot of filtering options here, so you can choose how much detail you show in this report. If you wanted to show the internal table names for these calculations or anything, you could do that if you're trying to build reports and trying to understand in the database how things are calculated. But this would also be helpful for users that don't actually have access to the custom calculations under the administration menu. They could run this report to be able to see what the name of the calculation is and description and how it's calculated. So a description here would be really helpful for those people. So you know when you're looking at the summary or detailed reports, you have all of these report custom calculations, and sometimes they're intuitive, sometimes not so much. Sometimes they look like the standard calculations. So this would be a helpful reference report. So now that we've looked at quite a few of the advanced reports, which ones should you use, and how do you know which ones you should use? So which ones are right for me? You know, this is something we all have to dig deep to figure out, but it's basically how advanced you are in the system, how much reporting you're doing, and what modules you're using. So we have a couple of reports highlighted here that are typically recommended and seem to be widely used and appreciated by clients. So I mentioned before we've looked at the timesheet status report. Again, if you're using leave accrual summaries, great report to use. The summary report values and role privileges are two of the key administrator reports that we would point out. And percent historical utilization, we took a look at that one. You know, the functionality that you can execute from it can be really powerful if you need that. And also, this can be a good report if you are just starting out to report on utilization and just starting out on resource management. The resource profiles, this is also a report that's helpful for looking at skills across resources. So we haven't looked at that one in the examples, but that's one that is typically used when you've got skills in the system and doing resource management. Pending billings we looked at, pending recognition, very similar report there. So if you're doing recognition, obviously that would be helpful as well. And then under expenses, we have the expense report status. So I like this report for clients to run to see where expenses are outstanding. So expenses don't have a time period like a timesheet. So you can have in your policy that we want you to submit, 2 or 3 days after a trip or within 2 weeks, or submit expenses monthly or weekly, but there really isn't anything in the system to control that. So the expense report status can show you where you have expenses that are open and should be submitted based on the date of the expense report. So you can reach out to people and say, hey, get that expense report in, or did you take this trip, or are you going to take the trip? Just making sure that you're keeping your system clean and that you're also getting your expense reports submitted in a timely manner. Then we have the accounts receivable. So again, if you're using payments in the system, this is a great report. Excuse me there. Retainer balances and retainer activity. We didn't look at this report. If you're using retainers, these are some of the only reports that give you specific retainer information. So would certainly point you to those. Now there are, again, other reports here that you may like. Project overview, we looked at that. You can run those overview reports and kind of have a bulk list of them. So I think that's nice. Fixed fee projections you might find helpful as well. But for some of these other reports, we don't see them as widely used, or we may start with that report, working with clients, kind of show them that report as a basis, but typically end up having to customize it for clients. So we go to a summary or a detailed report instead. So when should we use advanced report versus other report types? So another philosophical question here. We have kind of some pros and cons here, or advantages versus limitations. So as I mentioned, the advanced reports, they can be very powerful, but they can also have some limitations because they're not as customizable. So when I might suggest that you look to advanced reports is if you're new to OpenAir reporting, you're a new client, you're just deploying the system, or new administrator, there are so many options in the summary and detail reports that it can be a bit overwhelming. So if you're looking to familiarize yourself with the data in the system, with the look and feel of the reporting, play around with some configuration options without being overwhelmed, the advanced reports can be great for that. Obviously, if there's some functionality that maybe you're not using, or you're not maintaining that data in the system, you may find a lot of zeros in those reports or something, but at least you can start to understand how the filtering works, how the columns and rows, the criteria that you select affects the columns and rows. So it can be good for kind of self-helping on learning the reports. Or as I mentioned before, if resourcing or project reporting is new for the organization. So often we see clients that are coming from another system, or they already have a manual system in place, so they have specific requirements. But sometimes there's clients where this is implementing a PSA tool such as OpenAir is a new process, and it's an organizational change, a cultural change for reporting time and tracking projects and formalizing process a bit more. And in those cases, reporting isn't always predefined, and the reporting requirements can kind of be defined by how you're using the system. And so these reports can be helpful to show you what's available, and maybe start with that, start with some simple reports, and then as you need more metrics and more customizations, start implementing the summary and detail reports. And the custom calculations. So if you're not using custom calculations, then you can also use these reports. If you need your custom calculations, they're not able to be included in the advanced reports, so you're already going to be driven to the summary and detail reports there. So if you don't have a custom calculations, and you don't need to include those in reporting on these types of reports, then you can go ahead and start looking at the advanced and maybe start there. And then reporting values that are only available with the advanced reports. So missing timesheets. You can't get that out of a detail or summary report. the pending billings and revenue recognition report for creating transactions. It's unique functionality. You're not going to get that out of the standard or detail reports. And the hierarchy and custom field omission reports. Again, it's OpenAir. It's not always easy to report on things that are missing or omitted. So these reports can be helpful from an administrative standpoint. And the aging report, again, that the aging buckets is unique to that accounts receivable report. So now we'll look at some of maybe the limitations. One of them being that the utilization reports really are more flexible if you're using the summary reports versus the advanced report. So the custom calculations can allow you to really analyze utilization and break it down. You can break it down to various levels, summarizing by task types and time types and project types and all sorts of things. So custom calculations are very, very flexible, and you can label them so you know what the metric is. So in this report here, I've got a sample of, I have some custom calculations for my billable utilization percent versus non-billable, PTO, travel. So for my organization, these are the categories that we're tracking for utilization, and rather than having to run that advanced report 4 different times by just configuring the report differently, I can get this view of total utilization with the breakdown. So it's a bit more flexible, and also more flexible in the detail and the roll-up that you can include. So also the subtotals and the roll-up and information grouping is better in the summary reports. It's more flexible, more options, as I just mentioned. And finally, the color coding is really only available in the historical utilization report, so not available in other advanced reports. And the color coding can really be helpful for identifying items that are outliers and exceptions. So great for exception reporting to highlight in red where things are wrong, or yellow and orange where things might be hitting a point of escalation. So that is the end of my presentation portion here. So just want to, before I open up the line, point you guys to our website. We do have a lot of useful information. Not only do we do these webinars, but we also have a LinkedIn OpenAir user group. We try to push out information, and also users collaborate together on that. We host user group meetings regionally, so in different locations. The next one we have will be in February in London for those of you guys over in the UK. So we do those about once a month, every once a month, 6 weeks or so. And that schedule will be posted on our website as well. And if you have any questions about our services or follow-up questions on the webinar, feel free to email info@topstepconsulting.com. So that's info@topstepconsulting.com. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.